Hello YouTube, I'm Andrew Does Hair. You can find my work on Instagram at Andrew Does Hair. If you were to do so, you would see that my work is in fact hair. However, oftentimes my work with hair kind of coincides with work with the camera. It's for that reason that I find a lot of joy sometimes speaking about cameras. I want to start this instead of some big long intro. I want to just kick it off with a little bit of a story. I got a message a year, 2 years ago from a huge hair influencer. And they reached out and they said, hey, I want to buy a good camera. And somebody told me that you know a little bit about cameras that are good for the salon or whatever. Do you think this is a good one? And what they linked to me was a Canon R5. Not the R5, the R5 kit, like the lens and everything. So we're talking, $5,000, $6,000 camera here. So I asked this person for, more information because I'm like, that's a lot of money to spend. Let's make sure we know what you're looking to buy here. And what this person said is, my iPhone is full. I can't put any more photos or videos on it. Do you think that this camera I sent you can hold a lot of photos and videos? I didn't know what to say back. I thought I was being trolled. If you didn't know, inside of just about every camera, there's a memory card. This is where the pictures and videos are saved. So this person wanted to spend $5,000 or $6,000 on a camera thinking that the higher end camera would hold more photos because their phone was full. I sent them a link to a hard drive and I said, put your phone photos on this hard drive. There you go. Now your phone doesn't have photos on it. It was a $30 solution. With all of that said, hopefully that story was, hopefully you were on the edge of your seat the way that I was as it was happening. I don't know what ended up happening. I don't know if they bought a camera or not, but I see this question pop up all the time on social media. What's a good first camera? I want to dissect that phrase. What does good mean when it comes to a camera? And especially, what does good mean when it's paired with the word first? If you are aiming for good first camera to mean, I don't need to know anything, I can pick it up and take a photo that's going to look better than my phone, or a video that's going to look better than my phone. If that's what you think a good camera is going to do for you, you're mistaken. Here's the thing, phone companies, all of them really, they have decimated the market as far as I don't know what I'm doing cameras. If you don't know what you're doing, if you don't want to learn a new skill, if you don't want to learn what this does or what this does, if you don't want to learn that, if that's not something you're interested in doing, but you think that buying a better camera is going to get you better content, but you don't want to learn what this does, don't do it. Nobody does that better than iPhone, Google, whoever else, all those different phone cameras, they are designed for the I don't know what I'm doing shooter. So that is step number one. If you want to take good camera to mean it's just going to do a better photo or do a better video for me, no matter what camera you buy, if you get the $5,000 or $6,000 camera and you set it to auto, it'll sometimes outperform a phone, but it's not going to consistently do it until you learn what that does. In fact, I could list, and I won't, and I'm not saying this to shame anybody, I'm just saying this to help you avoid doing what I've seen some people do. I could list, I actually follow a handful of stylists who at one point posted, I'm so excited, I bought this A7 ... by Sony, and get ready content, I'm leveling up. And I'm excited when I see that. I tend to tune back in and I'm like, oh cool, this person's getting into photography, great. And what I've seen more often than not is after the weeks and months go by, their content doesn't change. And it's because they bought a very expensive camera designed for a professional without defining what good might mean, and especially when paired with the word first after it. Good first camera is not a professional camera. A good first camera has a completely different meaning, and that's what I want to break down and talk about in this video as I discuss this Canon 40D. So I'll be going through some bullet points here with the help of my phone to remind me what I'm talking about. And as I do so, I want to pretty much make a case for why I believe this camera is a very good first camera. Mind you, if you don't want to learn the new skill, if you don't want to learn what that does or what that does, just use your phone. Don't waste your time with the rest of this video. But if you're curious and you're open to the idea of spending an afternoon or two learning about that, maybe this video could be a good first step for you. So the first reason that I believe the Canon 40D is the best good first camera there is the cost. When this camera was brand new and back in like 2007, I believe it was $1,300, $1,500, somewhere in that range, I forget. Today, they're very cheap. If you go to eBay and you buy the first one you find and it's in good condition, it's tested, it works and it has a very low shutter count on it. Think of shutter count as like miles on a car. You're gonna spend maybe $100 on this camera. I bought 2 of these in the last couple months. The first one came on my radar because I was trying to buy a Christmas gift for my brother who wants to get into photography, and I was looking for what's a good first cheap camera. And I found on eBay, if you're willing to do the shopping around and the searching and taking a little bit of risk, buying maybe an untested model, I bought one of these for $40. And so I like to joke that the 40D in the name stands for $40. And when that thing came to me before I gifted it to my brother, I was not expecting much, but I fell in love with it. And so basically the camera can cost as low as 40 bucks. And after I gifted my brother his camera and I fell in love with the camera in the process, I bought one for myself. And this one, I didn't spend as much time wheeling and dealing on eBay. I put in less offers and I was a little bit less patient, and I ended up spending $60 on the camera. But just for this conversation's sake, we'll just say average 50 bucks this camera can cost if you're willing to shop around. I've seen them for, you know, about 120 bucks in immaculate, perfect condition, but we'll just say 50 bucks to, you know, split the difference. I paid 40, I paid 60. So we'll say 50 bucks is what this camera body costs. That is crazy. That is insane. Like, when I heard that a camera in that price range even exists, I don't know what I expected. Like, that alone struck curiosity in me. If you go walk into, I don't know, Best Buy or Walmart or if you go on Amazon and you just look for entry-level camera, you're gonna spend $400 to $600. And so the idea that something exists in the $50 range that is a real camera, and this is absolutely a real camera, is mind-blowing. Now, here's the bigger thing about cost is I didn't say price, I said cost, because cost is price minus resale value when you're done using it. The camera I'm recording on right now is a Canon R6. I bought this thing brand new in 2020 for, I believe it was $2,500 or $2,600. Today, it's January 2024, so the camera is 3.5 years old. I could buy this same camera that I'm recording on that I paid $2,500 for just a few years ago. I could buy it on eBay right now for $1,200 or $1,300 bucks. So in a couple years, $1,200 or $1,300 disappeared out of this camera. That value is just gone. That's never coming back. When you are looking for a first camera, this is a camera you will make mistakes with. This is a camera you might break. Not this one though, I'll get into that. This is a camera that you might, I don't know, you're not used to carrying a camera with you, you forget it in the salon, it's gone forever. A first camera is a beater camera that it's just like a first car. You don't want to get a nice car for your first car. You want to get a beater camera. In 1 year or 3 years, whether you buy the top of the line camera or whether you buy something that's really simple, that's a good first camera, you're going to resell it. There's a saying in photography that you date your bodies and you marry your lenses. Any camera body you buy, whether it's 50 bucks or $5,000, the technology in cameras changes so quickly. It's similar to phones, and so the value in camera bodies is just like this. So if you bought a brand new, $1,500 camera, and whether you learn to use it or not, in 3 years when you go, maybe I want a different one, or 5 years, that camera is going to be worth a fraction of what you paid for it. In 2019, I bought a Canon EOS RP for $1,300, maybe $1,400, somewhere in that range. Today, they're 650 bucks. And so that's not that long for that value to cut in half. So for that purpose, I think something in this price range, meaning like the absolute reduced down, most bottom of the line price range there is for cameras, if you buy this and you have it for 10 years, the value's not going anywhere. It's staying right there. This has a fantastic value and a fantastic cost because of that. I mentioned a minute ago that you date your camera bodies and you marry your lenses. So the second reason that this is a very good first camera is lens selection. The Canon EF mount has been around for like 35 years or something. It came out in the 80s. So close to 40 years now, this lens mount has been around. And because of that, there is an absolute plethora of lenses available for it. The Sony mount it's known for having a lot of good third-party options, and the newer Canon RF mount is known for having very few options, unfortunately. But the Canon EF mount is still, if you go to any random camera website and you just search for used lenses, the majority of them are going to fit this camera. So because of the availability, lenses for this camera tend to be a lot cheaper than the identical lens for different systems. For example, this lens on here is a 50mm f1.8 by a company called Yongnuo. It's a very cheap lens. It is, in fact, probably the cheapest real lens that I've ever seen. I paid $35 for this. And so this entire setup that I'm holding here is under $100. I think I paid, if I got the $40 body and the $35 lens, we're talking about a $75 real camera here. You cannot find a $35 50mm f1.8 for any other lens mount. And so this lens mount is Like I said, it's been around forever. There's a lot of lenses available for it. As you go to search for lenses for this camera, I generally tell people to shop lens first, but because this video is about the camera body, I'm telling you, buy a 40D and then go find a lens for it. But search for EF mount or EF-S mount. Both of those lenses will fit this camera. However, RF mount will not fit, and EF-M mount will not fit this camera. So be careful when you're buying lenses, because all the time I get hairstylists who are like, how do I get this lens on my camera? And I'm like, ooh, you bought the wrong mount. EF lens, EF-S lens will fit this camera, and you will find a million of them used for very, very cheap compared to other lens mounts. Build quality. What makes a good camera? I think build quality is huge. When I bought my first camera, it was a Canon Rebel. It was made of plastic, and similar to this lens, it had a very kind of cheap plasticky feel to it. And I actually had that camera for a good year before I even touched a real professional camera. And I remember one of my clients brought in his 5D series camera, and that's like a high-end, you know, top-of-the-line professional camera. I remember picking up his camera and going, oh my gosh, that thing feels amazing. It feels like a tank. The Canon 40D came from an era, 2007, before they were making low-end cameras out of plastic. Back then, even though this was not an entry-level camera even then, this was like a very serious grade camera, but the model right after this one, the 50D, I believe, is when they switched to doing plastic cameras. My Canon R6 that I'm recording on right now is plastic and is lightweight. To my hand, it feels cheap. To my hand, this feels like $1,000,000. This feels so good. I will never worry about bonking this camera. Cameras are supposed to be solid, rugged, indestructible things. And today, unless you're getting a $4,000 specialty camera that's meant to go out in the field, you're gonna get a plastic camera. It's actually a big complaint that I have about modern cameras is they feel cheap again. They feel like my first entry-level Canon Rebel felt. And so with the Canon 40D, you are getting such a solid, robust, metal, sturdy beast of a camera. And you know, Canon has kind of been renowned over the years for being very comfortable in hand. This camera is one of the most comfortable I've ever felt. Speaking of comfort, the ergonomics of this camera are second to none. Canon had a reputation for a long time for having the most comfortable, most intuitive cameras. I would say, even with their newer mirrorless stuff, like, it's comfortable, it's intuitive, but it's not nearly as good as what it used to be. Silly little example here about the ergonomics and the controls. On this 40D, you will find, if you look at the back of this camera, there is a jog wheel, a thumb wheel here, and then on top you got another wheel up here, and even crazier is this little like nipple joystick thing. Go look at modern Canon cameras and just look at every model and see how much money you have to spend to get a wheel on the back and a little nipple joystick. That is a high-end feature. And the reason they tend to put it on high-end cameras is professionals want a very tactile, ergonomic experience with their camera. Consumers don't mind sitting there looking at the screen and going like this to control their camera and then going to get their shot. But professionals want to be able to, by the time the camera gets to your eye, you're already making the adjustments and feeling the camera change to know where it's going to be set by the time it comes to your eyes. For example, the autofocus system in this camera has like 9 points in a diamond shape, and the joystick here can go in each direction diagonally and whatever. And if I center press it, I get the center point. Every time I pick this camera up, on the way to my eye, I'm looking at the shot I want to get, and just muscle memory, I touch the joystick in the direction of the autofocus point that I want. And by the time it goes to my eye, that point is selected. To where with a lower end camera or even some higher end new cameras, I hated so many modern cameras for this. Without that little joystick thing, if I have a newer camera and I want to change my autofocus point selection, I'll have to press a button to activate that. And then I have to look either through the viewfinder or at the back screen to change the focusing mode. And that just takes precious seconds if you're trying to get the shot. And what it does is it equates to a camera that gets in your way, a camera that you have to stop and think about frequently. But the ergonomics of this camera, you press the buttons and move the things so intuitively, the way that you would with a very high-end professional camera. This is something that they think about with high-end professional cameras, is they want it to be a tactile, intuitive experience that you can change on the fly without looking at. And with entry-level cameras, they don't think about that. They think, oh, well, we'll just put everything on a screen here. Like when you fiddle with, if you go get a modern mirrorless camera, every time you want to change or adjust something, it involves looking at a screen, and then you get to see a little animation pop up and so much information on the screen. And with this, here's a pretty solid example of how this camera makes controlling your camera very easy because of its simplicity. A common post you will see online is from Hair Color. It's saying look, I have a professional Sony A7 whatever, I have an older iPhone, and I have a modern iPhone, and I'm comparing these photos that I took with them, and you can see that the older iPhone has the most accurate of all the colors, or at least to my eye, that's what it is. And ultimately, they've got their professional camera set to auto. The iPhone, it shoots in auto, that's how the iPhone works. And so they're comparing these three cameras that they don't know how to use, that they don't understand how to use. Now, there's a setting called white balance. You know, with most modern cameras, if you want to change your white balance, you either have to know where it is, or you have to like go into a menu and look for the words WB. Like on my R6, I don't have a white balance button, but on my 40D, there's a button right here that says WB. And so what white balance is, it's a global adjustment on the image that will compensate for the color of light in which you're shooting. So I'm sitting under a gray sky right now, so everything's a little bit cool tones here. So my camera is set to record a little bit warmer to compensate for that. So this is what white balance is. Your iPhone will do it automatically. No matter what fancy camera you get, if you set it to auto, again, sometimes it'll outperform the iPhone, sometimes it won't. In a case-by-case basis, it's like letting an 8-year-old drive a Ferrari and drive a Ford Focus, and then proving that the Ford Focus is faster than the Ferrari because the 8-year-old went further in the automatic Ford Focus than he did in the manual Ferrari. You know what I'm saying? So with this camera, with the 40D, I have a white balance button right here. And if I don't know what I'm doing, but sooner or later I'm gonna go, what is WB? And I'll notice that if I shift it around and take pictures, the colors are changing. And like, oh, well, that was easy. There's a button right there that's labeled white balance. I was going to say without getting too far into it, but I guess I just went pretty far into it. This camera is very, very intuitive to use. In fact, since when I say that I fell in love with it after holding onto one for a few days before gifting it, the reason I fell in love with it is that I never have to look at the back screen to use the camera. I can glance at a couple numbers up here that are just very simple, no animations, no like, you know, explanations, no stuff popping up. It's not like using a computer. It's like using, I'm not a gun guy, but like I don't use guns, but I've been shooting like once or twice. This thing feels like using a gun. Like it just feels like you click a switch and you push a button. It's a very tactile experience. It's not menus and touchscreens and all that. But I do believe that because of that, it's a heck of a lot easier to learn with, making it a good first camera. You know, one other thing that makes a good first camera is simple menus. Canon is renowned for having very simple menus. This camera, I haven't even looked. The menu has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages. There's 8 pages in this menu. Each page has like 3 to 5 things in it. And so ultimately there's, you know, maybe a total of like 50, not even 50. There's probably like 35 things you can look at in the menu here. And that's like as deep as this camera goes. It's not that complex. If you go look at like, I don't know, any mirrorless camera, like here's the thing, this autofocus system is archaic, it's simple, it's only a couple points, and it's like, oh, well, that's not gonna be good enough for, but if you wanna get the fancy eye tracking like I'm using on the camera I'm recording with, see, it follows my eyes, and it follows me while I focus. The menu in the R6, just for autofocus, like just the autofocus portion of the menu, has as many things to select and change, has as many points in it as this camera has in the entirety of its menu. And so for a first camera, one thing that will make a good first camera is not eye autofocus if it requires having to dig through 79 menu points. Like a friend of mine, he's got a fancy modern mirrorless camera that I told him not to buy. He'll send me messages and be like, oh, why isn't this in focus? Why isn't this focus? I use autofocus. And I'm like, well, did you go into your menu and make sure it was set to people and not vehicles? Like, so in one sense, it's like, oh, it's easier. It's got eye autofocus. But no, it's also got extra menu items because of that. It's kind of like, I know a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't want fancy new cars with all the different things and all the stuff because that's just more stuff to break. That's kind of how I feel about this camera is, look, if you're learning photography, you got some basics that you got to figure out before you start worrying about the 40-second page of your menu. And then again, I'll knock Sony here because I'm a Sony hater and I'm a Canon fanboy. If you go watch reviews for the past several years, and I watch a lot of Sony reviews because I'm curious, but even some of their flagship cameras get dings in the reviews for having complex menu systems. And granted, it's an opinion. Some people are gonna go, I have a Sony and I get the menu systems, you just must be dumb. It's an opinion, but it's also what's called a popular opinion. You will see all the time like, oh man, why does Sony get the menus wrong? It's just been a thing that's plagued them for a long time. I hear that they're getting better. But it's when you're buying a first camera, one thing that makes a first camera a good first camera is simple menus. And this camera has very, very simple menus. Canon in general tends to have simpler menus. All right, and the final thing, and likely probably the most important thing on people's minds when they think of buying a good camera is like, does it take good pictures? Well, yeah. Let's dissect what a good picture is. You know, I think the thing that comes to most people's minds, especially consumers, non-photographers, and even newer photographers who don't have a lot of experience yet, is we think of resolution as a better picture. We think higher megapixels equals better picture. And this old camera happens to only have 10 megapixels, which, mind you, is still 5 times more resolution than what Instagram can display. And so, you know, we go, oh, it's only 10 megapixels. This Sony that I was looking at is 24 megapixels, so therefore it'll take a better picture. That just tends to be how we think. And I think it's actually remnants left over from, you know, the early 2000s, early 2000s when we would shop for like a point and shoot camera or digicam, and we would compare the 4 megapixel with the 5 megapixel. And when you're looking at that, yeah, that makes a difference. But when you're looking at 10 to 20 megapixels, especially displayed on a screen or for Instagram, you won't really see the difference all that much. But here's what will make a photo pretty or good, is the colors. And here's the thing is, you know, I know that in hairdressing and in barbering, it's a big hot topic. Like, you're not supposed to edit your photos because that's lying to the customer. One thing I love about these older Canon cameras, and the reason I started buying them, and I barely use my R6 now, is these older Canon cameras from like 2005 to 2012 era, they are renowned for having beautiful colors straight out of the camera. If I set this thing to shoot JPEGs, the colors that come out of it are absolutely gorgeous. It is beautiful. Maybe it's not the highest resolution, maybe I can't crop a whole bunch, but this thing has the magic sauce. I would say the Canon 5D Classic, another camera that I've ranted about on YouTube, I think has the best colors of all time. The vibe out of that camera is, you cannot beat it. But the second best that I've ever used is this camera. It's a little bit brighter and bolder, and I would say kind of like more stylized than the 6D that I've also ranted about on this YouTube channel. So I think the 6D has wonderful colors too. And so I would say like 5D Classics up here, this camera's right here, and then the 6D's right here. And then way down here is the colors out of my Canon R6, which you're looking at in this video right now. Is a completely unedited video straight out of camera. But yeah, dude, Canon these days, I want to say they lost their magic color sauce. But this camera, the $40 40D, has some magic colors to it. And what I mean is you can get beautiful colors, beautiful photos out of it without editing. And here I would challenge you, my last Sony knock, and then I'll wrap up this video. If you were to Google the words, how to make my Canon camera look like a Sony, you wouldn't find a single person on earth trying to do it, because nobody's trying to do that. And so what's a good first camera? The one that looks beautiful right out of camera, where you don't have to edit it, or the one that needs some work to look pretty? If you do Google how to make my Canon camera look like a Sony, do you know what you will find is dozens and dozens of results, blog posts, you know, YouTube tutorials, that sort of thing, showing people with Sony cameras how to get those Canon colors out of their Sony camera. Because Canon just had this sauce for a long time, this just color rendition that is sought after, that keeps some of these older Canons still very much in demand. Even if the prices are, you know, rock bottom these days, there is a huge and growing niche market for these. I have a feeling these are as cheap as they're going to get, and they're about to get more expensive because the color rendition is pretty. It's kind of like a lot of hipsters in recent years. We've been shooting film because, like, oh, it's got this vibe to it, this color to it that you just can't get with digital. So now what I'm seeing that scene do, myself included, is we're going, whoa, dude, this camera from 2007 or 2005 that I didn't think much about for the last couple of years, it actually has really pretty colors. And we're starting to get this kind of nostalgia factor out of the colors of these kinds of cameras. And so as the digicams are growing, so are older Canon DSLRs are actually starting to get popularity. And it's for that reason, along with the many other reasons that I listed, that I believe the Canon 40D is a very, very good first camera. Thanks for watching.